Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up, after the move in Argentina to decriminalise abortion was rejected, we take a look at how in any case the debate is now expanding to other Latin American countries. Also, how research has revealed that women these days speak at a much lower pitch than either their mothers or grandmothers. We're going to be talking to British sociologist and writer Karpf on why that is indeed the case, and how a Philadelphia engineer is hoping to drive the car mechanics trade towards equality. But first, in Latin America is home to some of the most restrictive abortion laws in the world. Out of 33 countries, only Cuba and Uruguay have legalised the procedure. Yet, despite Argentina recently opting not to decriminalise abortion, there's now a push in a number of nations to amend laws dealing with women's reproductive rights, as Marios Sofos reports.
It's estimated that 6.5 billion abortions are carried out across Latin America every year, 3/4 of which are against the law and often performed in unsafe, illegal clinics or at home. This 28-year-old Cuban architect became pregnant at the age of 18.
In my case, as I was really young, I wasn't prepared for that moment.
In 1965, Cuba became the first Latin American nation to decriminalise abortion, and it has been easily accessible upon request since the end of the 1970s. Yet this is mostly unheard of within the largely devout Roman Catholic group of countries. Some Latin American countries allow terminations only in cases of rape, incest, or if the health of the mother or fetus is at risk. In Mexico, abortion is severely restricted in all 31 states. However, it was legalised in the capital, Mexico City, back in 2007. Speaking anonymously, this Mexican woman described her experience before and after legalisation.
The
first time I had an abortion was 12 years ago. I was still underage. The abortion was not legal. And it was a very different experience to later. I was on the verge of dying.
Her second abortion took place in 2018.
It was very quick. The procedure lasted about 15 minutes. It was like a routine visit to the gynecologist, and there was no risk. I went in and left 2 hours later, more or less. That was it.
In certain countries in Latin America, abortion remains completely outlawed. Since 1998, El Salvador has been unforgiving and extremely restrictive. Women can face up to 50 years in prison for terminating a pregnancy and can even be imprisoned for miscarrying. Teodora Vasquez spent 10 years and 7 months in jail following an abortion.
I think the most difficult moment a person can live through is inside prison, especially when you are paying for a crime you haven't committed when you know you're innocent.
For pro-choice activists in Latin America, a major battleground in the struggle to decriminalise abortion is Brazil, following a rare Supreme Court hearing on legalisation there in early August. A sign of things to come perhaps, though opposition from Conservatives remains firm.
Now go back some 50 or 60 years ago and listen to women speaking, and most will sound very different. Let's just take a look, or listen rather.
He fell off and I picked him out of the dust and held him in my arms. He always said I hugged him before I ever even knew his name. And they both knew right away? Of course.
Come on, say good morning.
How about feeding a hungry husband?
Certainly, darling. And I have a surprise for you this morning.
Well, after all, Richard, you're the one that can make her understand.
Think so?
Have it out with her. I'm certain you can prove to her which is more important. You or that, Carl, or whatever his name is, who runs that awful place on the Bowery.
So what did you notice? It seems women today speak at a deeper pitch than either their mothers or grandmothers would have done. Karpf is a columnist, sociologist and writer of such books as The Human Voice and joins me now from London. And thank you so much for being with us. Scientists at the University of South Australia compared recordings of women talking in the 1940s with more recent recordings taken in the early 1990s. Now, they say with more women working than ever before, we're adopting a deeper tone to project authority and dominance in the workplace. Would you agree?
I think that's probably true. I mean, certainly that research by Cecilia Pemberton's really interesting, and it's been replicated more recently in other countries around the world. I mean, we don't know for certain the reasons. We can speculate, and probably there's more than one reason. But almost certainly it's because men in every sphere of life, let's face it, are the benchmark, and particularly in the workplace. And as more women have been entering the workplace, we have been trying more and more to sound like men, to adopt the kind of voice that is associated with authority and gravity. I mean, it's a really interesting question because the voice is one of the ways through which we sort of perform gender. So although obviously there are anatomical differences between men and women's voices, we sound more different than the anatomy requires us to, as it were. So it's clear that something is happening whereby what women think is the kind of voice that is effective is changing.
Are we doing harm to our vocal cords, however, by deepening our voices?
Take the example of Japan. Now, in Japan, women's voices were much higher than in other countries in the world, say the Netherlands, because countries where men and women are pretty much more socially equal, or the roles are defined more equally, the voices sound more similar. It's really interesting. In Japan, by contrast, what was seen as an attractive female voice was a very high-pitched voice for a long time, much more higher pitched than in other countries. And then that started to change. So what happened was that Japanese female broadcasters started to try and bring their voices down rather too deeply. And although most of us have many voices. Our voices aren't fixed. We have quite a wide vocal range. If you try and force your voice artificially low, you can damage it. And there is a lot of evidence that's emerged out of Japan that that's exactly what happened.
And what is so wrong with having a feminine voice?
Ah, well, what a good question. What is wrong is the attitudes to it, the prejudice against women's voices, and boy, it's a long and rather shocking history. You know, it goes back to St. Paul, who said that it was shocking for women, shameful for women to speak in church, or, you know, the women's voices, if they are high, have been described as squeaky or screeching. If they're low, they're considered sexual and evoking impure thoughts in men. So obviously the problem is the women's voice, not the men's thoughts. So there's been an enormously long history of prejudice against women's voices, and women are on a kind of double bind, because if they have the kind of voices that are associated with being, you know, feminine, which are high voices generally, then disparaged as not being authoritative enough. If women then deepen their voices, they're either pushing them too low and damaging them, or described as trying to imitate men, or a really deep voice in a woman is associated with sexuality. So they're seen as not authoritative, but sexy. So it's a bit of a kind of no-win situation for women's voices at the moment.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much, Anne Karpf, speaking to us there from London. And finally, those of us who had or have cars know the deal. That moment when it needs to be serviced and you find yourself being talked down to by a male mechanic. One American woman engineer decided the time was up. Now, the Philadelphia native runs a nearly all-women car clinic in the hope of driving the industry towards gender equality.
Patrice Banks used to manage an engineering lab before switching gears. Now she runs Girls Auto Clinic, an almost all-female car repair shop outside of Philadelphia.
We show women how to take these and clean them.
Patrice used to dread routine car checkups, intimidated by an industry that caters mostly to men. Unable to find a female mechanic, she decided to take things into her own hands and become one herself.
Millions of other women, too, just like me. feel taken advantage of, auto airheads, hate their experience, need a guy, want to call their husband. It's not a very empowering space to be in. And, you know, especially as a woman who's an engineer who owns her own house, we usually just accept our auto airhead fate, right? Well, this is kind of how it is. And now you don't have to do that anymore.
After completing her training, she began hosting a series of workshops to educate other women about their cars. They were so successful, she opened up her own garage, complete with a nail salon for customers. Just over a year old, Girls Auto Clinic employs 10 people, 9 of which are women. They call themselves she-canics, and many say the shop means an end to stereotypes they have faced throughout their careers.
I can come in, be me, I can dress however I want per se, and I'm not going to get judged whether I look girly enough or too boyish per se because of the type of work I'm going to do that day.
For the most part, working with women is like, these women is like working with a bunch of ball busters basically. It's not much different than working in another shop except like less egos.
Women make up nearly half of all drivers in the U.S., but female technicians and mechanics total only about 3%. Patrice says the large majority of her customers are female.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth a 30-minute trip because it's a lot more intimate of an experience and I get to really learn more about my vehicle.
Girls Auto Clinic is looking to capitalize on its loyal customer base. They have just launched a crowdfunding campaign with the goal of hiring she-canics across the country and turning the shop into a nationwide franchise.
And that's it for now. You can connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being for us 24.51%, or send us a tweet at _51%. Please keep those comments and story ideas coming in. So until our next show, bye for now.